Today, I would like not only to speak on the World Migratory Bird Day campaign, which is a good way to raise awareness in the grand public, but I will show you also what we are doing with 82 countries, from Russia to South Africa, to protect wild migratory bird along what we call the flyway. Flyway are kind of highway for birds when they migrate from the breeding ground, from the northern part of Europe to the southern part of Africa. So the World Migratory Bird Day, it is the 12th year now of celebration. It's a campaign which has been launched when we discuss avian influenza. It's a strange coincidence because we are living under a pandemic period, and at that time there was this avian influenza. People were accusing wild birds, especially ducks, to widespread the virus of the avian influenza. Unfortunately, it has not yet been transmitted to human, so it stays mainly a wildlife disease, a zoonosis, as we call it. But we are still following it also every autumn. And you have some spot of avian influenza in Europe, but the Ministry of Agriculture take care of it, and by unfortunately culling ducks in farms. So we launched this campaign 12 years ago just to explain to people that what is the role of water birds. And this year there is two peak day of celebration, the second weekend of May and the second weekend of October. Why two peak for a World Migratory Bird Day? It's because on request of the African parties of AEVA notably, but also for India, many birds are coming into this country during the autumn and leaving early spring. So in May, they don't have so many birds to show. So in the Southern Hemisphere, they celebrate the World Migratory Bird Day in October, but we will celebrate also this World Migratory Bird Day here in Hungary and elsewhere in Europe on the 9th of October. So now in almost bit more than 10 days. The theme is chosen this year to remind us that we need to stay connected with nature. Yeah, I will wait 1 minute for the music. And it's a good introduction because, in fact, when you look at the composer of music, some of them have been inspired by the music. For example, Ludwig van Beethoven, for the symphony, the Fifth Symphony, was inspired by the yellow hammer, which is a small bird, and he sings ti-ti-ti-ti-ti, like the beginning of this symphony. So it is commonly agreed that he was inspired by this bird, very widespread in Germany where he was living at that time. So yeah, so this campaign this year is to connect us with nature, because during this pandemic period, many people notice birds singing in their garden because there was less noise, especially in the city, with less cars, less plane, and it was a good period to reconnect with nature. And also, people working with mental health have shown that we need this contact with nature for us. And if you are visiting this exhibition, I am sure you share this view. being hunters, being bird watcher, all of us, we need nature just for us, yeah, to relax, to get serenity. So I would like to enjoy you to visit our website, worldmigratorybirdday.org, just to see what will happen in Hungary and in other parts of the world, just to celebrate, to join. It's a campaign every year, so you can also organize yourselves next year to organize some events. Many hunting clubs are organizing either field visit to show birds to people, or if they manage wetlands, for example, they open the wetlands to grand public to visit it. So please have a look at the website. And now I will present what we are doing to contribute to the sustainable use of migratory birds, and especially migratory water birds, because here in Europe, as you know, we have a lot of countries, not only the country belonging to the EU, the 27 countries, but more than 45 countries are involved in water birds conservation, inside EU and outside EU. And we need to work together just to improve the situation of those birds, and for those which are unable to keep the possibility of harvest. So I will go through a presentation because it's always better to have some slides, some picture, and even a map, you will see, just to explain what we are doing. So I will go through three main points. What is AIVA, what is this treaty, and what is it about? Then I will try to summarize the long story of sustainable use, and then I will show you how to implement adaptive management in Europe for water birds. Some of you already know almost everything. Thanks, Tamas. So, what is AIVA? It's a United Nations legally binding treaty. It means that countries like Hungary, which have joined the agreement, make decisions all together, and then they implement those decisions on the ground. So it's a network of countries which are linked together with common objective. So AIVA means African Eurasian Migratory Waterbird Agreement. It was concluded in 1995, and it entered into force 4 years after, because the treaty specifies that it will enter into force after 14 countries join the treaty. And the foundation of AIVA, and it was quite new at that time, lies in the flyway approach. And the flyway approach is to ensure the conservation and sustainable use of migratory water birds along the entire length of their flyways, of their travels, through an international legal framework. So it was quite new in the legal domain, this flyway approach, because as often, of course, each country has its national legislation, but we need to coordinate it. If a species is really declining, we should not permit it too high harvest on the flyway. If a species is increasing, like some goose species, and cause damage, agricultural damage, we can solve it all together. So it's this kind of idea we try to implement. So what is the flyways, these big highways for birds? You can see that currently the scientists distinguish 4 main flyways. So the African one, dealing mainly with Northern America and part of Latin America. Then you have the African Eurasian flyway. In yellow, you have perhaps the smallest one, the Central Asian flyway. And in red, you have the East Asian Australasian flyway. So it shows you also that those birds are like athletes, Olympic athletes. Some of them are flying more than 10,000 kilometers from their breeding ground to their wintering ground. You have some waders flying from Kachamka, wintering east coast of Australia, for example. So it's fantastic for such birds. Some of them are weighing only 100 grams. So imagine how, for them, what it represents to travel that distance. So the African Eurasian flyway encompasses 119 countries, so half of the countries in the world, and at the present moment, 81 countries, Hungary is one of it, and the European Union have ratified the treaty and are working together. And we are expecting more, like Turkey in here. So the green country are parties to AEVA. We are dealing with 254 species belonging to 18 families. And yeah, we are working on common species, on endangered species, and as I mentioned, we are working both on conservation for the endangered species, but also on sustainable use for huntable species. So we have three components in the treaty. I will summarize them very quickly. First fundamental principle, we have to keep a favorable conservation status of those birds. When it's not favorable, we are trying to restore this conservation status, and we are using also the precautionary principle. We have general conservation measures, as in many countries, sustainable use, habitat management, alien species research, and we have a legally binding action plan, and the originality of this action plan is we revise the status of the species every 3 years. If you look at the bird directive, the list has been written in the 70s, and nothing has changed, even if the species are increasing or decreasing, increasing like the barnacle goose, which is now quite a common species. In AEVA, based on the best knowledge, we revise the status and we adapt our implementation. We have three main bodies. That's the same for climate change, for the Biodiversity Convention based in Montreal. We are based in Bonn in Germany. You have a meeting of the party. It is called for climate change the Conference of the Parties. The difference is because we are a regional treaty, we are not a global treaty like the Biodiversity Convention or the Climate Change Convention. So we have the meeting of the party, which met every 3 years. For climate, it's every year. For Biodiversity Convention, it's every 2 years. We have a standing committee which steers the operation between the two sessions of a MOP during 3 years, and our advice is based on a technical committee. So we work on the population level, which is really important. We are not working on the species level because sometimes a population is doing better than another, so there is no need to spend the same amount of money for these two populations. As I mentioned, we are working on the flyway approach. We are a regional treaty, I already said, and we are providing a framework for all countries to work together. So, second part of my presentation is hunting and sustainable use. And it's quite a long story, especially in Europe. Since more than 1 century, and I'm sure here in Hungary, even earlier, you have general regulation. The kings, for example, ask people not to kill deers. It was just for the kings and the noble people. But so general regulation have always existing. Hunting season, mode of taking, and trade. And those regulations have really improved the situation and the status of migratory birds. But as we notice now, habitats, wetlands mainly for water birds, are either deteriorating or even destroyed. And those general regulations are not enough now just to keep a favorable conservation status for birds. It should be noted that there has been a successful implementation of adaptive management in Northern America, and I will explain what it means. Of course, it's a bit easier because USA and Canada and then Mexico have signed a treaty more than 1 century ago, far before the Bird Directive and other convention, just to, and it was pushed by the hunters at that time. They create an NGO, Duck Unlimited, and the 3 governments decided to have action plan to protect ducks and wetlands. And it was after this great dust bowl, for those which are interested in history in America, it was a period of dry season and the wetlands were disappearing. So, and it's work. They have decided not only to have season, but to set up quota for species. For the declining one, they reduce the quota. You are, for example, able to kill only 1 to 2 pintail a day. For the more common species, you can kill 5 or 10. And this regulation change every 3 years now, linked with the bird count the birders and the official are doing. And you can see in blue the active US waterfowlers, the waterbird hunters, and you can see for the last plan that it's the most stable. In red, you can see the breeding duck population. So you can see that with effort on regulating hunting and on wetlands conservation or restoration, you can increase the number of ducks while maintaining the number of hunters. And it's the core of our action also, to give opportunity to hunters to continue to hunt wild birds. So what we have learned from USA and this Northern Plan of adaptive management in Northern America. It's based on the best knowledge and expertise. It means we don't know everything, of course, but it's a doing by learning approach. It means we decide some action, we see the result, and then we modify or not the regulation. When, for example, Northern America authorities set up some quota, they have not the sound knowledge, so they decided on some numbers for each species, and if the population recover, then they increase the quota. If the population continue to decrease, they decrease the quota. So that's a learning by doing approach, because of course we will never know everything, even if we spend most of our time in wetlands or in nature. They work on the flyway population level, perfect for AEVA, of course. It's our level as well. It's also very important to have good consultation and transparency with all stakeholders, because bird conservation should not be the objective on only one community. We need everybody on board, hunting community, conservation community, forester, because some water birds are breeding in the forest, some waders and some ducks. And we need to gather everybody, farmers community as well, just to be successful in safeguarding this treasure. And of course, we have to adapt the harvest and the habitat restoration measures, not every year, but just taking stock of the result and make it even better. So, until AEVA, there was no flyway dimension in Europe, which was a pity because, of course, the species breeding in Russia, traveling through some of the European countries to winter in Africa, we need to have measures all the way long. So no flyway dimension at that time. There is still a lack of harmonized system for the collection of harvest data. Some countries have mandatory collection of harvest data. Some others do some sample every 10 years, like in France. Some others have only voluntary sample, like in the UK, for example. And there was no coordination for setting quota, if any. It means countries set up quota without taking care of what is done in the neighboring country. So it's a prehistoric time. So the objective of sustainable use, but probably you know already it, is to ensure that any use of migratory bird is based on an assessment of the best available knowledge, of course, but also that we take care of the ecological system also that support them. So it's a global approach. I will just show you two examples. One is a pink-footed goose. You can see some of them. And we're lucky because the picture below with this band neck, every bird has a specific one. So it means it's like our identity card. We can recognize each bird. And it's a small population, 60,000 birds. There is two populations, in fact, one breeding in Greenland, going through Iceland and wintering in UK, and the other one from the Spitsberg, now we call it Svalbard, going through Norway and through Norway, Denmark, and wintering in Belgium and Netherlands. And the small goose species make it very well. It's increased tremendously, and in Denmark and even more in Norway, cause huge agricultural damage. So the hunters were saying, and the farmers were saying, okay, we will kill them, all of them, because we are upset by the damage. So then IVA came and said, okay, we will see what we can do to reduce the population, but with a safety net. We can reduce the population, but we still need to keep, of course, a sufficient number to ensure the favorable conservation status. So we are working on the population, what we call the Svalbard population for this species. So it's a species which increased tremendously. The second species I will talk about is Taiga Bean Goose. It's a bit more difficult because we have less knowledge. Very few birds are banded, so it's more difficult to do population modeling. And also there is 4 populations, some of them overlapping, especially during wintering. And here we are interested in Western, Central, Eastern one population, but you have some of them going to China also. And unfortunately, this species, which is specialized on farmland in autumn and winter, is declining. And it is assumed that without any action, for example, this species will disappear from Germany within the next 10 years. So in one case, we have to reduce the population to control agricultural damage, but I will show pictures. There is not only agricultural damage, there is now ecological damage. And for this one, we need to restore habitats, perhaps to create protected habitat, and to reduce the hunting, the harvest, without banning it. We want to let hunters have a chance to kill one Taiga bean goose in their life. It's really important to have the collaboration of the hunting community to restore small wetlands in the forest, for example, in Finland. So, as I mentioned, we have, and you can look at them if you are interested on the IVA website. For one species, the Taiga bean goose, we will focus on population recovery. And for the one which increased, and you have here from 1965 till 2013, you have the number of goose increasing there. So we are focusing on maintaining population in a favorable status, taking into account socioeconomic interest. It means we have to reduce this population to 60,000 birds. And then we will see if there is still damage. Why this is so important also? You can see on the graph, it's a picture of the damage, the estimation of the damage in the Netherlands for all species of goose, and it's more than 10 million euro a year. So we assume that this 10 million euro a year should be better used instead of giving compensation to farmers. But you have also, of course, some issues with for example, aerial security for plane. You have this famous movie with Clint Eastwood, and it was Canada goose which enters the motor of the plane. So it's not a dream, it's happened quite often. Fortunately, the plane are often able to land with the passenger, but we never know. If the population continues to grow, of course, the number of accidents will increase. So we have to take care of all these dimensions when we think about bird conservation. And I talk about ecological damage. Here in the Svalbard, you can see that geese are really efficient grazers. They graze the grass. And now you have bare land here. And it's an ecological damage, not only because the tundra will take years to recover if we keep goose outside this site, but also because many waders are breeding on this grass. And if there is only bare land, it means that the predator will see the eggs very, very easily, and we will see other species affected by this degradation of the vegetation. So you have both economic damage, even human security with the flight, and you have ecological damage. So we need to act. We can't say, okay, I want to see as many birds as we can. That's a dream. And the adaptive management is a human construction. We have to decide all together to set up objectives, to say, okay, it would be nice to have 60,000 pink-footed goose. It's probably enough to keep it safe and to prevent damage. It's not easy. When we were discussing with farmers, of course, they want less. Bird conservationists, they say, no, but let them growing as much as they can. Governments, okay, we have an issue, and as the IVA is a intergovernmental treaty, of course, the last words stay with the government. And they decided to reduce the population. For example, in Denmark, which is one very important staggering site, they have decided to add 1 month more for hunting season, because they were, even if the hunters, the waterfowl hunters are successful in Denmark, just to reduce the population, you need a longer season. So instead of closing the season end of December, they were allowed to hunt in January, just to harvest more birds. Of course, in other case, for non-native species, we can reduce the hunting season, or we can reduce the quota. It's worked both sides. So, what are the basic principles for flyway management? Water birds should be managed by identifiable population, of course. We should consider that those populations are shared resources, share between countries and share between human community. It's really important. Problems are often transboundary. For example, it's difficult to reduce the number of some goose species in Russia, except if we send helicopters and army to kill birds. So it's better to reduce the population in the wintering ground. So it means Western Europe and so on. And inaction is likely to exacerbate the problem, yeah, because, for example, in USA, they protect. The snow goose was a huntable species, but with small quota, and now the manager of wetlands, the farmers, but even the bird conservationists say, don't make the same mistakes than us. Don't let some population increase such a way that they are using all the space for breeding. The snow goose is a good example in North America of what not to do. So we try to, as I mentioned, to keep or to restore population in a favorable conservation status. Of course, it means we are acting on harvest and on habitats, of course, and it is recognized that the managed either subsistence, mainly in Africa, or recreational harvest of the renewable waterbird resources, because it should be seen as a renewable waterbird resources. So these harvests are desirable, legitimate, and consistent with its conservation, which is not so evident, because for people who love birds, and if they have no evidence on hunting, okay, they will say, why should we kill some birds? So we have to explain why we need to maintain an equilibrium. So, of course, management requires dynamic structured decision-making and stakeholder participation. And we gather, for example, for the goose issues, we are gathering every year government, experts, scientists, farmers, just together to discuss the figures, to discuss the result, and to set up the new quota for the next season. So it's really important, and even if we have some uncertainties, we need to act. So, in Paris, in May 16, all countries agree on this principle, and they have created what we call the European Goose Management Platform, dealing now with more than those 2 species I present. We are dealing also with the barnacle goose and the grey lag goose. The barnacle goose were considered as an endangered species in '79 when the bird directive was adopted. And you can see now on the graph what is the modeling from 2015 till 2035. If we don't take care of this population, the population will increase from 1.2 million to 10 million. And of course, by competition, it will create negative impact on some of the birds, because it's a small goose, but it's rather aggressive towards the other species. And now you can see this bird was breeding only in the high Arctic, but now you can see breeding birds in public garden in the Netherlands. So there is a complete shift of the ecology of this species, and we should revise the status of this species, even within the bird directive. We are also, with the support of Finland, working on the common eider. Common eider is still the most common duck on the Baltic, but we have seen quite a sharp decline. And to prevent stopping hunting, we are working on it to try to understand what are the drivers of this decline, and to adopt an action plan to stop the decline and to maintain hunting, because it's a very important quarry species there for all the country around the Baltic. So my conclusion is rather simple, even if the subject is rather technical. For a successful migratory waterbird adaptive management, which should be the next step for this century, we need the support and the commitment of the hunting community. It is essential that the hunting communities, together with the bird community, promote this adaptive management for not only birds, but for also the sustainable use of a species. So I would like to thank you for listening, and I'm ready to answer any question if you have. Thanks a lot.